All right, that one's recording. Okay, well, I think we'll get started, and hopefully a couple more people will join us as we go along. So as I was saying, it has been a bit of a crazy week. Advising finished 5 o'clock on Tuesday, and then we had reports to write Wednesday and today. So I have not done the feedback on your practice paper, but I do have time to do that tomorrow morning, hopefully. So my goal is to get the practice feedback back to you by lunchtime tomorrow, so that you can use that feedback to work on the first graded paper. I've got the paper is up, the article's up, so if you want to start reading it, it's there. I hope you enjoy it. I'm trying to pick new articles that I haven't used before this semester to do something new, and find things that are a bit more recent. So I hope you enjoy this week's article. Use the template the same way that we discussed last week. And as I said, I should have your feedback back to you by lunchtime tomorrow. And then that should help you set up your new template. Okay. What else? What else? Before we start, I think that's all. I think that's all. So let me share the PowerPoint. Okay, can you see that all right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Michelle. Okay. All right, so just a little bit of information to try to help you start thinking about what you need to be looking for to create your own purpose statement and then to support that statement. I think it's next week. Next week's the 4th, right? Yes. So next week we have a library specialist coming to give you the lecture, and she's going to talk you through how to use the databases and how to order articles if you can't get at them online and things like that. So then that will also start getting you ready for digging around and finding your own question. Okay, so there we go. So I say when possible. The when possible really applies to your other classes, because for this class I require peer-reviewed research, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. So peer-reviewed means that it's gone through a process of editing and review, so it's not some of the pay for publication type journal articles don't get reviewed, and so we really want you to concentrate on.
From the heavens, you can't see the classroom. It's gonna be.
You okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, I was having a technical difficulty. I preached it now.
That's okay. And we'll show you how to find peer-reviewed research next week in the databases. There's a little box you can actually click, and then it will only give you articles that have come from a peer-reviewed journal. So that's always useful. Another thing to think about, If it's peer-reviewed, you would hope it's really, really high quality, but that isn't always the case. It does depend on the level of the journal a little bit. And also one thing I like to point out always to students is that the researchers who are doing the reviewing for the article are not paid for that work, right? Jonathan, can you turn your microphone off for me? So they don't get paid for that work, and it takes quite a lot of time to review an article well, okay? So, you know, sometimes things slip through the loop and through the hole. So you would, as I said, you would hope that if it's in a peer-reviewed journal article that it's going to be good quality, and mostly they are very good quality. Every now and then, though, you might read something and go, wait a minute, that doesn't quite make sense here. Let me read that again. And if you read it several times and it still doesn't make sense, you know, there are errors in published research, just like there are in textbooks and magazines and newspapers, right? It occurs. So be careful. As I said, in this class you don't have this choice, but in your other classes, be a little bit careful about using things like blogs, because there's no overall kind of control of those. People can put up whatever they want, and that, you know, can lead to there being a lot of information out on the internet that is just completely wrong. Okay, so be a little bit careful about that. You don't want to use information in a paper that is misinformed and incorrect. Okay, and then when, as we said last week, when we're getting, you know, in the next week or so, you really want to start thinking, what am I interested in? What do I want to have to read about for the rest of the semester after midterm? Okay, so what material is of interest to you when you're looking to develop your purpose statement when we're going up to midterm? So that purpose statement is the last thing that's due just before midterm grades. Okay, so it should be fun, right? Thinking of a problem and researching that problem and reading about that problem should be fun. If it's not fun, you haven't got the right problem. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind this week and next week while we're teaching you how to use the library, so that once you know how to manipulate all the tools that the library's got for you, you can start looking for material that is really of interest to you. Okay? And every semester I forget to go in and take that information down. Okay, so the textbook and the APA manual both go into a lot of detail about what peer-reviewed literature is and how do you make the decision whether the journal is good quality or whether it's something that people wouldn't really read, because there are quite a few of those out there. And they're getting more and more. I get emails every day from publications I've never heard of, from editors and things saying, oh, why don't you submit your research here? Last week I got one from some obscure, I mean, it was just like, I don't know, something to do with biology or chemistry. And I'm like, do you even know what I do? Like, why are you writing to me, right? So those kinds of emails, I've never, I mean, we're getting inundated with them now. And, you know, 5 years ago, I'd never even heard of a pay-for-publication journal. So, you know, you do want to be a little bit careful about the quality of the journal that you're picking your articles from. Ignore all this, because that was to do with another article that you guys have not read. Okay. So I'm going to summarize a little bit about what next week's lesson will be, partly because I want, hopefully everybody is going to watch this lecture in a few, either today or tomorrow or over the weekend, and I would really like a group of you to dial in live next week and be here for a guest speaker. It would be really embarrassing if I bring a guest speaker in and no one dials in live. I will just have to crawl under the desk and die. So please don't do that to me. Okay, so I want to summarize quickly what you're going to learn next week, so that maybe that will motivate some of you to jump on into class. So if you go to the web page for what is now the Golden Student Success Center, used to just be the Golden Library, it was so much easier, and there's a link to go to databases, and then when you click on that link you get piles and piles and piles of databases. Luckily, the library have very kindly created an HPE research page for us, and she'll show you how to get there next week. And on the HPE research page, we have listed the databases that are likely to be the most useful for you, because otherwise you could spend forever looking through hundreds of databases. Okay, so that will save you a little bit of time. Just go straight to the HPE research page. You can search in a database by subject. So if you like basketball, you can type in basketball and you'll get 3,500 articles pop up. So you might want to narrow down your search terms a little bit more. Okay. If you find one article about something that you like that is really usable, you could search for that author of the first article and see whether they've written anything else that you can use. If there's a specific journal, like I really like Research Quarterly for Exercise and Sport, I can go directly to that journal and look for articles there. Right? Those of you that are, so it's always a bit tricky because now we only have the sports admin degree plan, but some of you are more kind of coaching, training people, and some of you are admin, director type people. And there's some journals, again on our HPE page, we have some journals that might be useful for everybody. Whatever you do, don't pay for articles, okay? We are very lucky that we have an amazing, generous administration when it comes to research. And so they fund what we call the interlibrary loan. And so you can ask the library to get an article or a chapter of a book that you can't get to yourself through the databases or through Google search or something like that, okay? So don't ever pay. Sometimes you'll click on an article and it will bring up an abstract and then it will tell you you've got to pay $35 for a 24-hour access to this art. Don't do that. Don't pay anything, all right? You are fully funded to get any research paper you want through the library. And that is an amazing tool because let me tell you, when I was in grad school and I was at a Research One Institute, I was at Auburn University in Alabama, we did not get completely free interlibrary loan. Like we got 3 or 4 articles a month as PhD students, and if we wanted more than that, we had to pay something for them. So here you don't need to, okay? So that's a pretty big perk. do plan ahead. Our interlibrary loan is amazingly fast. For most journal articles, they're going to get it to you within a day or two. They say to allow 5 or 7 days, but usually it comes through very, very fast. A book chapter can take a little bit longer. If it's an international journal, it might take a little bit longer, depends. So what they do is they go to all the other libraries in New Mexico and they see if someone has that article, and then they have an agreement that they'll scan it in and send it here for whatever they pay for it, right? But we don't pay, okay? The library pays. Okay, so back to our friend the APA manual. All right, last week we looked at APA references, which is what you will use for this class, okay? But I'm going to run through a little bit of information about APA citations, because when you're writing papers in your other classes and you are using someone's ideas, you have to give them credit for that, and then you have to match it to the reference list. All right? So the citation is the piece that goes actually in the text to tell the reader where to go in the reference list to find that information. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah? So, page 253. So this is in chapter 8. And chapter 8 is about works that are credited in the text. So the reason, there's a couple of reasons when you, no, let's start with the why. The why you do it, right, is typically because you are using some information that you found somewhere else, and it's plagiarism to take ownership of that and not say where you got it from. All right? So that's a really bad plan in grad school. We went through the plagiarism idea last week. We want to avoid that if we can. All right? So if you find some information in another article, okay, someone has their microphone on. Because I can hear a television. Who's here? Is it just John and...
Mine is on.
Okay, who have we got in here? Someone else has joined us. Brent.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, do you have your microphone on?
I do not.
Okay, Jonathan, it looks to me like you have your microphone on, my friend. So can you go down the bottom of your screen and put a cross through the microphone symbol? There we go. Well done, thank you. That's it. Now I can't hear the telly. That's good. All right. So we will always use a citation to give credit when we have used some information from somewhere else. All right? And that doesn't mean that I necessarily quoted it, right? Even if I just am supporting something, right? So if I say training program A appears to produce better results for adolescent males in high school, right? that came from somewhere. Okay, even if you didn't quote it and you put it all in your own words, then you're just pulling together lots of information. That information isn't yours, so you have to use the citation. Okay. The other reason that we use the citation is to allow the reader who's reading your paper to go, wow, that's really fascinating. I'd like to know more about that. And then they can go to your reference list and find the original paper and read it for themselves if they want to. Okay? Now there's a couple of whens. I mean, when I think personally, especially at the master's level, that you're better off oversighting than underciting, right? So typically, if you, within a sentence or even within a paragraph, you use information from the same place once or twice, you would cite it the first time, right? And you don't necessarily have to cite it again unless you change the content of the information that you're taking from that paper, okay? So you don't always have to cite every sentence, okay? On the other hand, because of the plagiarism issue, as I said, I think it's safer until you learn to write in a graduate style to oversight than undercite. I don't teach any other graduate classes anymore, so you might want to check in with the other faculty about how they feel about that when you start a class with them. Okay? The rules for citing are not quite as silly as all the rules for the references, but there's still a lot of them. All right? So it depends what type of reference it is. Is it a journal article? Is it a book? Is it a newspaper article? Right? Was it some kind of internet source? Okay? So there's lots of different types of formats, but they're not quite as changeable as the reference list ones are. Okay? And then you can do it a couple of ways. You could say Pasco, open brackets, the year of the paper, close brackets, said blah, 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 right? Or you could say blah, 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 and this applies to my paper in this way, and then you could open brackets and put Pasco and the year and close brackets. So there's a couple of ways, and it's nice to mix and match those a little bit in a paper so that the flow of the paper is a little bit more interesting to read. Again, pay attention to the detail. You know, like I said last week in the reference, if you miss a comma, it's wrong. And it's annoying, but that's just what APA is about, okay? The number of authors changes the format, and it changes during the paper depending on the number of authors. There are, again, lots of rules. Don't try to learn them, right? Really don't try to learn them. Just know it's a citation. Let me go check. How many authors do I have? What kind of reference is it? Let me go check chapter 8 and make sure I'm doing the citation correctly. And that's, you know, I would not waste time trying to learn it, honestly, because there's just too many rules. All right, let me have a look here. Yes. Okay. So, punctuation. Remember, last week I said there are rules for everything and things you wouldn't think about. It's punctuation rules. So, there's the page numbers to take you straight to the punctuation rules. The space has gone back to once. So if you're as old as me, when we learned to type in school, you had to space twice on the typewriter after a period, right? So you learned to space twice. Then I went to grad school, and in the 5th edition of APA, you were only allowed to space once. So I had to keep going back and correcting that. And then when I came here to teach, after the first year, we got the 6th edition, and you went back to twice after a period. And now in the 7th edition, we've gone back to once after a period. Okay? Here's a little cheat for you, right? It's a really useful cheat. When you've written your paper, if you're in Word, right? When you've written your paper, you can do a find and replace, even on punctuation, right? So you can do, you can click on the find and replace icon, and in the find line, you can do period, space, space, and in the replace line, you can do period, space, and press go, and it will correct your whole paper for you. It's a really good cheat, because then you don't have to worry about remembering as you're typing, am I doing 2 spaces or once, right? So, good cheat to know. One of the rules I always point out, because again, it depends on your age, it depends at what point you went through English class in school. So let me do this on the whiteboard so that I'm not just saying it and you can actually see what I mean here. Okay. So you may have learned in school to do red, blue, and white with only a comma here, right? So again, you know, I'm older than you guys. When I was in school, we were taught to have a comma here as well. Oops. That doesn't work, does it? So we were taught red, blue, and white, right? And then that comma went away for a long time. So it really does depend when you went through English in school. In APA, they want that comma back before the and. So if you're doing a list of items with comma, 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 make sure that you include the comma before the and. All right? Oh yeah, I forgot I chucked all these rules at you this week. It's not really chucking them at you, okay? Try not to, I hope I'm not overwhelming you. That's not the idea. I'm just trying to point out some of the items there are rules about so that you start using the manual, all right? So spelling and abbreviation, so when do you put a hyphen and when do you not put a hyphen? 161, what chapter is that? That is going to be chapter 6. for spelling and hyphenation. And then 172 is a really useful area in chapter 6 because it looks at how do you abbreviate things. All right, so how do you abbreviate kilograms, right? And is there a space between, so if I'm saying 9 centimeters, is it 9 space centimeters, or is it 9 centimeters straight away? Do I have to put a period at the end of the centimeter, right? All those kinds of things. Again, don't bother learning them, use your book, right? Just assume there's a rule and look for it, because it will be there, I promise you. All right, so units of measurement, units of time are in this area, 172 to 176. And then 178 to 188 talks to you about numbers and statistical formatting. Now, the general rule of thumb for numbers is that anything to 10 is written out and anything over is numerical, except if you're starting the sentence with a number, right? If you are starting the sentence with a number, you have to write the whole number out no matter what the number is. So that's something to be wary of when you're on a word limit, all right? Because if you say, let's see, 3,560 participants were measured, right? That's a lot of extra words you've used up in order to write the number out. Okay? So in that instance, what I would suggest is that you rearrange the sentence somehow so that you can have 3,560, whatever it was, in its numerical form, not written out in full. Okay? Okay, let me go back here. Whoops. Ah! Okay, any questions on the APA formatting ideas?
No,
No,
not me.
not free.
Okay, you know, it really is a case of just using the manual all the time. You know, I say it and I sound like a broken record, but it's the only way. I don't take off a lot of points for APA, certainly not in the summary templates. A little bit more when we get to the next half of the semester, but not much generally. And I think it depends on who you're working with. You know, some faculty are very finicky about APA. Some faculty are a little bit less finicky about APA, right? I'm a little bit finicky just because at this point in your graduate career, I don't know how many of you might go on to further graduate work, right? And I don't want to send you out from ENMU and you decide to apply for a PhD program and you have no idea how to use an APA manual, right? That would make us look really bad. So that's, you know, I tend to be a little bit picky, or at least I highlight things to try to make you recognize that there's an error there, so you go and look it up and you can correct it, right? Just so that I'm hopefully laying a good foundation for you to manipulate that manual to your benefit if you want to go on. And some of you might, right? Even if you think right now, oh God, no, I'll never do a PhD or anything else. But you don't know, in 5 years' time you might go, God, I really, you know, another 3 years in school wouldn't be that bad, right? So I have to tell you, my master's and my PhD program was the best 5 years of my life. It was the most fun. You get to spend all day, every day doing just what you want to do. Oh, it's brilliant. Brilliant. So, okay, then what I want to do is go over the template situation one more time, because the more I repeat it, hopefully the more chance there is that people will fill that template in correctly and get good points. Okay? So, remember that in the template we are only going to type 2 lines per box on the row. Alright? It's a Word document, so can you type more than 2 lines in that box? Yes. Please don't. Okay? Just 2 per box. We're trying to keep this into 1 page. That template on 1 page, because that makes grading, well actually that's not a very big class this semester, but it makes grading a lot easier if it's all on 1 page. Don't take anything from the abstract for your summary, right? So when you look at a research article, typically there'll be an abstract at the top of the article, and then it'll go into the introduction and the main body of the paper, okay? Remember that the abstract is the author's version of an article summary, okay? So using the abstract is kind of like cheating because they've already summarized it for you. All right, I want you to learn to find the items within the real paper. You need to be able to skim a paper and pick out the highlights of the paper without reading the whole thing, because otherwise you're going to be taking forever to write your papers in your other classes. All right? So don't take anything from the abstract. Also, sometimes to make their word limit, they'll change the purpose and the conclusion slightly to fit the word limit, and then you don't have the real purpose and the real conclusion. Okay? So avoid that. For the box at the top for the reference, use the appropriate format from the APA manual that we went over last week. All right? Be very exact when you're copying the elements. Okay? So remember that we've got 1 chapter that tells you the rules for the reference, and 1 chapter that gives you examples for the reference. So if when you're looking at the example you can't tell whether there's a space or not a space, or right, then go back to the chapter on the rules and it should clarify it there for you. Okay? I think I mentioned this last week, but let me do it again just in case. In our discipline, you do not alphabetize the author list on a paper. All right? So when you are doing your reference, you're going to keep the authors in the exact same order they are in on the paper. Okay? That's slightly different in other formatting manuals, but for us, we keep the authors in the correct order because it represents their seniority on the paper, the amount of work they did on the paper. Okay? But when you do a reference list or your annotated bibliography, then you're going to put your papers in alphabetical order by the first author. And I'll try and remind you about that after midterm. Okay? so in the purpose box, that's one box where you're allowed to copy directly from the paper. So you're going to read the introduction, or whatever they call it, and you're going to find the statement that says the purpose of this paper was, or the aim of this paper was, or the reason we did this study was because, right? Something like that that tells you why they did the study. What was their question? Okay? Don't worry about the plagiarism rule for the purpose. Okay? I don't want you to change those words in case you slightly change the meaning of the purpose. Right? Until you've read a lot more research, I'd rather you kept that purpose clean. Okay? The type of article, so go to the beginning of your APA manual, there's a title, the type of article, right? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? Is it mixed methods? Is it not empirical? Is it a lit review? Right? If it's empirical, the word empirical means that the authors collected original data. If it's a lit review or a meta-analysis or, can't think of another, maybe just lit review and meta-analysis in there. Then what they've done is they've gathered a lot of other people's work and they're summarizing that work around one topic. Okay? So the design / method, this is where you're looking for the plan for data collection, if there was data collection, right? So if it's an empirical article, then particularly if it's quantitative, they plan when they're going to collect data, right? And so that's what you're looking for, you know. Is it observational? Is it experimental? Was it a survey? How many times did they collect data, right? So sometimes if it's a survey or observation, they only collect data once. If it's an intervention of any kind, I'll guarantee they collect data more than once, okay? Between subjects or within subjects, you might not be picking up this early in the semester, but let me explain those terms to you, just in case. Between subjects, so this would be if it was an intervention type study, so it's a pre-post or it's a repeated measures, right? You've got an option which term you use. And let's say you have Group A and Group B. Doesn't matter what we're measuring, all right? So we measure Group A and Group B at the beginning. We do whatever we're going to do with them. And then we measure Group A and Group B again at the end, okay? If it's between subjects, then what they'll do is they will compare Group A to Group B, right? So usually they'll use a mean of whatever the measurement is, and they'll compare the means for the two groups to see which group improved the most, for example, right? If it is within subjects, they're going to compare Group A pre to Group A post, and Group B pre to Group B post. So they want to see the change within that population across the intervention, rather than the change between the two groups. Right? The more research you read, the easier this stuff becomes. Right? Between and within are exactly what they say, but until you read it and you start to kind of pay attention to what are they comparing in this data analysis and these results, then it feels a little bit abstract. Right? But as I said, the more you read, the easier this stuff becomes. In the participant line, right, you want to include the characteristics that tie that population to the purpose statement. All right? So, for example, if the purpose statement talks about basketball players, but when you read the participant information, they say there were 15 male basketball players and 12 female basketball players. You don't necessarily have to include that separation. You can just say there were 27 basketball players. Depends how many words you've got spare, right? Because the sex of the players isn't highlighted in the purpose, it's not the primary variable of interest. Doesn't mean they won't analyze it, but it's not the primary variable of interest. Remember our IVs and DVs. Okay. So, another thing you might want to consider is, where did the study occur? Is that relevant to the purpose and the results? Right? Again, it depends on what the question was. Okay? If we're talking about, what example can I come up with? Okay, let's say we are considering outdoor activity for any population, right? But we're specifically looking at outdoor activity and its relation to total physical activity minutes in a week or something like that, okay? In my opinion, where the study was conducted would impact those results, right? Because if it's somewhere that's very hot and very humid, people might not go outside to do their exercise. They might exercise indoors in a gym, right? If it's somewhere where there's snow on the ground for 4 or 5 months of the year and you don't ski, right? That might impact the results. Okay? If it's looking at basketball and it was done in the States, I wouldn't bother saying it was done in the Northwest or the Midwest or the South of the United States, because I'm not sure that the culture of basketball, at least from the outside for me, the culture of basketball seems to be a national thing, not a regional. I could be completely wrong about that, of course, but all right. So in that instance, you don't have to say where the data was necessarily collected unless you've got enough words spare to put that information in. All right? Any questions so far?
No?
Oh,
Not here.
okay. So the next block down is the procedures. All right? And the procedures is the recipe for what the authors did to collect their data. All right? So Here you have to be a little bit careful to pick out the key kind of steps that they took. I think it's always useful again to go back to the purpose statement because, again, you know, if they had males and females, they might have collected that data a little bit differently or at different times of the year or who knows, right? But sex difference wasn't part of the purpose statement. So go back to your purpose, look at what the primary question is, and find the recipe for collecting the primary data. Right? So you're going to highlight the steps that they took to collect that primary data. So if it was a if it was a survey paper, right, then they will have mailed out 20,000 letters to people all over the country, and they received back 1,500 or something like that, right? That's step one. What's step two? Okay, and just keep going. If it's an intervention, then typically they are going to tell you about the pre-intervention, pre-test, right? What data did they collect in the pre-test? So sometimes that can be a bit long and you might need to cut it down, go back to your variables, which bits of data that they collected from these people relates directly to the question and not to the secondary question. Data analysis, so not the software package, people. I don't care if it was SPSS or any other type of software, all right? The software runs the data analysis, the statistical analysis, right? So instead of in the old days, before people had software, they had to do all their stats by hand. So they had all these numbers, and they had to hand calculate all the statistical analyses. Now we're lucky and lazy, right? We have our data, we plug it into the software program, we press the button, and bingo, it gives us the answer without us doing anything, right? Very nice, okay? So the software package is irrelevant because every software package runs the statistical analysis the same way, right? It's the analysis. So is it a t-test? Is it a correlation? Is it an analysis of variance? Is it a Wilcoxon, can't remember, right? Is it a chi-square, right? What's the statistical analysis? Okay? And they have some statistical analysis information in our textbook, so if you don't know the words you're looking for right now, have a look in the textbook and that'll help you out. Right? The nice thing about stats, she says, having taken a lot of stats classes in grad school, is that you don't actually have to understand them to interpret them. Right? So that's really useful. So that, you know, there's a set of rules. Like if it's bigger than this number, it means this. Okay, I can do that. Right? I can do that. So. Again, make sure that you're picking the analysis that was run on the primary question, because if they have secondary and third questions, then there's going to be tons of analyses in there and tons of results. And then it's like, how the heck do I summarize this into 300 words? You just ignore the stuff that doesn't relate directly to the purpose. Results, so again you might need to be disciplined on the results. Highlight the results from the statistical tests you labeled in the previous box. Okay? If there are piles of other results, you don't have to highlight those. It's a summary, right? You're picking out the key things to tell someone about this paper so they can decide whether or not they want to go and get the paper and read it for themselves. You don't have to give them every single piece of information, right? You just need to give them what are those books called that they use? Cliff notes, right? That's what the summary is. Okay? Now, the participants, the procedures, the data analysis, and the results, you just see, should all be in your own words. These are not the sections to copy and paste. All right? I want you to start reading it and cutting it down for yourself. Okay? Again, that will get easier during the semester as you read more papers. If you haven't read a lot of research up to this point, it can be difficult to reword data analysis and results. All right, give it a go. Maybe think about what was it they were comparing. Right? Perhaps they don't identify that. Or what was the alpha level? Right? So sometimes they might say alpha was set a priori at. That means in a quantitative paper, you have to pick ahead of time what your significance level is going to be. It's cheating to set it after the event, right? I've known people do that and get published. It's a bit frustrating, but it does happen. They may not say alpha. They may just give you a p-value, right? The p-value is alpha. They're kind of intertwined. So if alpha's set at 95%, p will be 0.05. She says, am I getting that wrong? I think so. Okay, so the conclusion is the other piece you can copy and paste. I want you to find the one sentence for the purpose and one sentence for the conclusion that states what the authors think they found. All right? And I warn you, sometimes it can feel very repetitive because sometimes they word it exactly the way they worded their results section. You're like, what? Why bother? Right? That's not your problem. You're summarizing the paper. The rule is find the one sentence where the authors tell you what they found. Right? Okay, and again, don't worry about the plagiarizing on the conclusion statement because again, if you try to change that into your own words, you might end up saying something that the authors didn't. So at this point in time, it's better to just copy and paste that conclusion sentence. All right? The conclusion is not in the future researchers should look at. That's a suggestion for future research. That's not the conclusion for what they found. Right? Anything else on the template? Oh, yes. Remember that you can shift a row of the template around if you need to. right? So you can't add any rows to that template. But if you've done your participants and you've got an empty line there before procedures, and then you're typing your procedures and you get to the end of the third box and you're like, I'm not feeling it, you can steal that row and slip it in at the bottom of your procedures and type another 2 rows. Right? It's a 300-word limit, not including the reference. There's a note about this on the page when you open up the folder. The first thing on the page in Blackboard is, here's the tips and rules, right? Can't think of anything else. So, questions?
No, at this point.
So here's the thing, it's due Monday night, so if you write a draft and you want me to look at that and give you feedback, try to get that to me sometime Sunday so that I can try and review it either Sunday afternoon or Monday morning and get it back to you so you can change it before the deadline. Right? If Monday at 11 o'clock is not going to work for a reasonable reason, email me over the weekend and say, can I hand it in on Tuesday? So that you don't get a late deduction. Don't email me Tuesday morning and go, oh, I couldn't meet last night's deadline because, so is it okay if I hand it in today? Yeah, but you'll get a late deduction. Right? So plan ahead, all right? It sounds a bit mean, but really it's for your benefit, right? To try to meet your deadlines. Now, if I don't know what the other faculty are doing, so if all of us have deadlines on Monday at 11 o'clock, that's a good reason to ask for an extension, right? Because I don't know what they're doing, okay? But the deadline is really there to help you stay on top of your work. So, as I said, I'm happy to give extensions for a reasonable reason, but you've got to ask for it ahead of time. You're grad students. Be proactive, plan ahead, think about what you've got coming up. If your parents are coming into town this weekend, you ain't going to make the Monday 11 o'clock deadline. Ask for an extension. Okay? What else can I say that would help? Ooh. Must be time for a glass of wine, folks. Oh, it is. It's 5:30. Look at that. Perfect. Yeah, just, email me if you have in Blackboard. Stick to Blackboard. Okay? I've had a couple of emails filtering in through Outlook. I'm not answering them. Right, so email me through Blackboard, or if you have a question about technique or kind of content, maybe put it in the discussion board, and then when I answer it, everybody can see the answer. Okay? I can't think of anything else. If you don't have questions. Short and sweet tonight. I do have a very, very, very packed schedule tomorrow. So if you do email or put a discussion board in tomorrow, chances are I won't get to it until Saturday. I don't do a lot on Saturdays, but I do try to at least check and see what's there in case there's anything urgent. that's it. If you can't think of anything else, if there's anything else that I've forgotten to say that you really, really want to know, now's the time. Nothing. Okay. All right, well, hopefully that means I made some sense. Can't always be guaranteed, let me tell you that. Sometimes I talk complete and utter gibberish. Okay. Aha. All right, so the article is up. I do apologise for not getting feedback to you on the practice. I will get that up by lunchtime tomorrow. But you can pull the article for this week down and start having a look at that if you want to this evening. If for any reason you can't open it or something like that, let me know. It should be okay. It's linked to the actual assignment. So I think when you click on the assignment, you should be able to open the article, but please let me know if you can't. And that's it. We're going to call it a day. So have a lovely evening. If you're here in town, it's meant to be a little bit warmer tomorrow, so that will be nice. And I'll look for your emails and whatever in case there are questions or drafts that you would like me to give you feedback on. All right? Okay, well, have a lovely evening. I will see you next week.
Thank you. We'll see you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, all of you. This